Okay, so this week we're looking at sociology and government policy. This is the last lesson that we have before our summer break, and hopefully this will be informative. Sadly, your textbook is a little bit all over the place on this, but I have tried to marry up my thinking with the textbook, but it will be a little bit jumpy around as far as the textbook is concerned. So the question we are asking ourselves is, what is the relationship between sociology and social policy? In a naive way, we'd say that sociologists study society, politicians take sociological research and turn them into laws, and then lawyers really work out what those laws are supposed to be. And there's a nice relationship there. But obviously, as with everything in society, things aren't quite that simple. So I think it's good for us to have a little chat, first of all, about what is a social policy. Because sometimes you guys can be walking around with your heads completely stuck into the real and the now and the present, and not really be aware of what's going on in the world around us. So for me, a social policy is any law that affects us, which is pretty much all laws. So a government policy is something that the government wants to do. When they then get that through the House of Parliament, it becomes a law, and then that's when we start talking about things like social policy. Yeah, that it is a law that affects our world. How much tax is there on a pint of beer? How much tax is there on a bottle of whiskey? I think on a bottle of whiskey, it's about 95% of a bottle of whiskey is tax, and about 70% of a pint of beer is tax. Do we like that? Is that a good idea? Yeah. When we're thinking about road tax, so my car, because it's got a very efficient engine in it, I only have to pay £20 a year in tax. Some older cars have to pay hundreds of pounds in road tax. Whereas the brand new electric cars don't pay very much. Is that the best way? Should we be thinking maybe about road tax, about how much you use the road should be how much you pay? So like a toll road, some of you might have been in a toll road in France or Germany or Italy or Spain. Those toll roads are charging you per kilometre rather than what your car is like. So really we're saying that a social policy is something that affects us and primarily addresses a social problem. Okay, that's what laws try to do, is make society better. Now, we do have to be aware here, I know it's a little bit sort of ethereal and a little bit sociological, but then we are doing sociology, is that we do need to be aware that sometimes sociologists don't study things because they want to make them better. They study things because they want to study things. Because some things are a social problem, are a sociological problem, rather than being a social problem. Yeah. So why do we behave in the way that we behave? Norms and values. How do we get those norms and values? Well, they're not problems. Yeah. So, for example, thinking about standing in queues. Standing in a queue isn't a problem for it doesn't need a law passed about it. There are no laws really about standing in queues and being polite and those kind of things, but they are things that sociologists want to study. Yeah, but they don't necessarily get involved with this social policy kind of thing. But we also need to be aware as well of influences. When we're thinking about social policies, different people are going to influence, and different ideas are going to influence things in different ways. So at the moment, Boris Johnson and the housing minister are getting into a bit of hot water because they're giving lots of big housing companies, allowing them to break the law in lots of ways so that they can build loads and loads of houses and make loads of money. And lo and behold, those big housing companies are giving loads of money to the Conservative Party. So there's a bit of an issue there in terms of what can influence social policy. So things like globalisation and interest groups and ideologies, and we'll come to ideologies later, can influence social policy, as well as study. Yeah. So the study bit is where we are in sociology. So we need to be aware that social policy is influenced by sociology. No, the rest of this lesson is about how does that influence take place? How is that influence shaped? How is that influence played out in the real world? Idea number one. Sociology has a gentle or slight influence on social policy. So here we can pick pretty much any theory, any idea in sociology, and have a little look and say, well, has this made a law? And if it's not made a law, then we can argue that it's had a sort of gentle influence on social policy. So, for example, Anne Oakley did that seminal piece of work on housework. Now, I'm not saying here that Anne Oakley has written any equal opportunities law, but what I am saying is that anybody who does write equal opportunities law will have Anne Oakley's work at the back of their mind. So therefore, a sociologist has written a piece of work that's gone into the general sort of ether of our social understanding, our sort of library of social understanding, and is kind of drawn upon, because we shouldn't expect women just to be baby factories and to look after the house. That women are equal individuals that can do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and shouldn't have these very negative patriarchal ideas placed upon them. Part of the fight against those ideas was Anne Oakley's work on housework. So therefore she's had a gentle impact on social policy. Not direct, she's not written any laws, she's not been responsible for writing any laws, but she has had an indirect or a slight or gentle impact. Interesting at the moment, we've got a bit of a contradiction I'm going to make here. Hopefully you A and B graders can cope with that contradiction. Deprivation theory is something we met in class in education and ethnicity in education, which basically says if you're poor, you don't get as good an education as you do if you're rich. Okay, so we've known about that for ages. We try and mitigate that. But isn't it interesting that just recently Marcus Rashford, a Manchester United footballer, has used those ideas of deprivation theory. He might not have known he's been using those, but that's exactly what he has been using to make the government change their mind about free school meals and what they should be doing in holidays. Yeah. So there we have, again, a gentle impact for years and years and years and years and years, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, and then whatever you call the last decade we've had, now becoming a direct impact with what Marcus Rashford has put pressure on the government to do. Okay, labelling theory and education is another really good example of a gentle impact. We're aware today, hey, maybe too much aware, that things that we say might have a negative impact on students, and therefore we need to mitigate the language that teachers use in order to motivate and to chastise students about how they're working or how they're not working. So therefore labelling theory might have seeped in gently to the educational ethos and mitigate and change how teachers behave, and maybe that's changed how pupils behave. So really interesting, those three kind of ideas about a gentle impact. You don't have to use those three ideas. You can use pretty much any study that you like to bring into this essay, where you're saying, hey look, this person has written such a powerful piece of work that it's got into our general understanding of how the world works, and therefore gently shapes how laws are created. Number 2. Sociology has a direct impact on social policy. Okay, so here we're having a conversation where we can see a direct link between a sociologist and a law that has been written, and therefore we can see that there is a direct link between sociology and social policy. So let's go back to talk about positivism. We've been talking about positivism lots in this 10 weeks together. Well, a positivist thinks that we can study society in a scientific way and a way that's free of values. So that will give politicians loads of facts that help them make decisions about how society is. So from a positivistic point of view, they will wander off and study society and then give that data and research to politicians, and that will help them form their decision-making process. Ergo, sociology has a direct impact on social policy. Okay. Then we come to a more social democratic approach. That's kind of social democratic, kind of centrist to a little bit left-wing politics, I suppose. Pretty much the politics of the Labour Party from 1997 to 2004, and primarily, not 2004, sorry, 2009, I think it was, wasn't it? 1997, 2009? I think so. So social democratic, help the poor. So we've got people here like Townsend, who's all of his studies are looking at how the poor are treated, how the poor get a rough deal, and trying to deal with that rough deal, all the way through your first year and second year textbooks to do with education and to do with crime and deviance. You'll see Townsend studies all over the place. They're what you can use here to help you look at somebody who's directly appealing to government about how the poor are treated and trying to get that situation changed. Something that we learnt about when we did families was the 2004 Children's Act. It's pretty much Anthony Giddens and his sort of third wave kind of idea. It's not structuralist, it's not interpretivist. There's a different way we can look at it. Famously, Tony Blair said it's not right-wing politics, it's not left-wing politics, there's a third way. Yeah, very much Anthony Giddens kind of conversation and Anthony Giddens ideas. So I'm saying to you here that Anthony Giddens pretty much wrote the 2004 Children's Act, direct impact, therefore, between a sociologist and laws. And then we can have a little conversation about the new right. They don't like welfare, they do like education. Yeah. So they want to get rid of welfare. They kind of believe, I suppose, in one way, a little bit like the government we've got at the moment, very influenced by the new right and right-wing kind of ideas, that we should not have as many benefits and we should get rid of as much of the government interfering with our lives as possible, so that people can make their own decisions, which is kind of the welfare kind of idea. But also the new right want to have a really robust education system that fits the needs of the marketplace today. So you're learning things in school that you can directly sell when you leave school and make you a better workforce, so you can earn more money, the government can get more tax. And so, again, we've learnt there about the 1988 Education Reform Act. Chubb and Moe are the two sociologists who influenced that lots. They're American sociologists, but Margaret Thatcher, when she wanted to reform the education system, sent some people over to America, were massively impressed by what Chubb and Moe were saying, and then brought their ideas back to Britain. So again, we've got a very direct impact of how sociology has written a law, which is what we're talking about with direct impacts. Idea number 3. Social policies are part of the problem. This is more of a critical approach to social policies. So here I'm mainly going to focus on Marxists and feminists. And so I'll start with Marxism. So Marxists believe that you are ideologically exploited by capitalism. 3 words there on the screen for you. Well, that ideology is supported by the laws that are created. And all of the laws that are created at the moment, yeah, and have always been created, if I'm a Marxist, are going to link to that idea of capitalism is great, and helping you understand that capitalism is great, yeah, and therefore is part of the problem. So we've got lots of things that are happening at the moment because of the lockdown, and the pressure that's being put on the government to end the lockdown is a financial pressure, is a capitalist pressure. So people are now starting to think about how much money is a life worth? Is it okay to lose some lives, if we've got the economy back up and running? That's an ideological position. It's a capitalist position. Marxists wouldn't like that. A really good example of this is health and safety, and we can use the lockdown to help us understand health and safety as well. So, who has benefited from the lockdown? Now, on one level, we could argue that we've all benefited because we all stay at home, we don't transfer the virus, and therefore we're saving lots of lives. But then when we start thinking about who's really benefited, well, what kind of things are selling lots more at the moment than ever have been? So we've got face masks, we've got hand sanitizer, a bit of a spoonerism there, hand sanitizer. We've got PPE kind of stuff, masks, that kind of thing, protection masks. Interesting, who makes those? Well, these big companies. Who owns these big companies? The ruling elite. So therefore, even though on the surface of it, a health and safety bit of legislation looks like it benefits us, keeping us nice and safe, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, it actually just benefits the ruling elite because they make loads of money out of us. So Marxists would have this kind of conversation about pretty much every law that exists, that it just benefits capitalism, and you're being ideologically brainwashed to accept that exploitation. So Marxists don't like social policy, okay? More positive from a feminist point of view, there's lots of feminists have written since the 1950s and 60s, and those feminists have hugely shaped how our world works. One brilliant example is the 1971 Divorce Reform Act, where women now have far more power and far more ability to get divorced and shape, and the welfare sort of benefits that are attached to that kind of process. Again, enable women to stand up on their own 2 feet and not be reliant on the male breadwinner. Really good feminist pressure, feminists pointing out the inequalities in society, laws changing. Equal opportunity laws as well is a really good example of the same kind of thing, of again feminists talking about the same kind of idea, the exploitation that exists and pointing it out, and then equal opportunities laws changing. So really good ideas there that you can go and look in your textbooks and you can have a really good idea about what those kind of things are. But the more extreme feminists, the more radical and Marxist second wave feminists, would argue that we haven't gone far enough and we need to go loads further, and that patriarchy and conflict still get in the way, and that a lot of these social policies are generically sexist in themselves, about things like marriage benefit, that you get a tax benefit for being married, is an inherently patriarchal kind of idea. So interesting to think about these kind of issues and these kind of problems. Again, remember your textbook is a little bit all over the place. This is the structure that you should go through in writing your essay. I'm quite happy for you to have a sort of 3-paragraph kind of idea where you explore each one of these 3 ideas, and that would make a brilliant essay for this week's essay question. Well, thank you for paying attention to these lessons, and hopefully they've been helpful. Your summer homework is to revise for your induction test. Friday the 11th of September is when that induction test is going to be. It's going to be released online for you to do wherever you are in the world and wherever you are, but it will be released at 1 p.m. British time and no earlier and no later. And for the majority of you, it will be released for just 1 hour. So it will just be there for an hour, so you only have an hour to answer the questions, to see what the questions are and then answer them just like a normal exam paper. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer, you can do it you can handwrite them and take photographs and upload the photographs if you want to upload the photographs. It's completely up to you how you access that, but it will only be open for 1 hour and then 1 hour and 15 minutes if you get extra time. And you will be sent the appropriate links depending on who you are at that kind of situation. So it'll be very clear what is what on the links that you get sent. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'll send you an email later just to clarify those kind of things as well. But have a great summer.